Welcome to another bonus episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton and Wasserman. And Dalton, I think at this point of the season, we're in the final month of the regular season. We're getting very, very close to college football playoff. And also, we're about a month away from giving out the most prestigious individual honor, I would say, in team sports. Honestly, that is the Heisman Trophy. So I thought it'd be cool to look over just the odds right now, who we think should be at the top of the Heisman list, and just in general, who will be ultimately in New York for the Heisman ceremony.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a fascinating race. We've seen some things that we haven't even seen before. When you talk about a guy like Travis Hunter, we've got great quarterbacks, who are putting up stupid level numbers. Ashton Jeanty at Boise State, maybe setting records down there, national records over there at Boise State. So I think you've got a very intriguing race where a lot of years it's just kind of picking which is the best quarterback. Now we've got several different types of players in this race, and it's going to be a lot of fun down the stretch.
Absolutely. So let's go over to our friends at DraftKings and give out their Heisman odds as of today. So right now, Travis Hunter, the corner/receiver from Colorado, and Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback from Oregon, are currently tied with the best odds at plus 260 right now. Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami, is plus 300. Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State, is plus 400. Cade Klubnik, the quarterback from Clemson, is at plus 2,000. And then if you want to know the rest of the top 10 real quick, Carson Beck is at plus 3,500, the quarterback from Georgia. Shedeur Sanders, quarterback from Colorado, plus 4,000. Jackson Dart, plus 5,000, the quarterback from Ole Miss. Jalen Monroe, also plus 5,000, the quarterback from Alabama. And Quinn Ewers is also plus 5,000, the quarterback from Texas. It's kind of the microcosm of what the top 10 Heisman candidates are right now, according to DraftKings Sportsbook. So what stands out to you, looking at that specifically, the top 5 of that list? Because we usually get around 4 to 5 finalists every year. So those are the current favorites to be in New York for the ceremony. What stands out to you about that list, though?
I think it's a good example there of those first 4 guys being the pretty clear 4 right now in this race. But I think the order of them is a little funky when you talk about Ashton Jeanty went into last week against in Boise State's game against UNLV, their biggest game of the regular season. And I believe he was first in the odds before the game, right? And he goes out there and he had to grind it out. It wasn't the flashy 300-yard rushing game that you see from Ashton Jeanty, but still had 128 yards and a touchdown. And Boise won their biggest game of the year that could set them up for a playoff run, assuming they run the table in the Mountain West. And yet he moves down to 4th in the odds there, and he's still on pace for a historic season, right? He still could challenge Barry Sanders' rushing record from what was it, 1988, I think it was, or 86.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about a guy doing historic things, and he's proven it last year and this year that he can do it against Power 5 competition. He shredded Oregon earlier this season. He proved it last year against Washington and UCLA. 128 yards and a touchdown for any other back is a really good day, but I guess this is the standard now we hold Ashton Jeanty to, where you go, okay, well, that's, he didn't carry them to some 50-point win or anything like that, but I go, UNLV's a really good football team, and you knew they'd be keying in on stopping him, and they did it about as well as he could, and he still had almost 130 yards. So for me, Ashton Jeanty would certainly be at least in the top 2.
I would agree with that, and you look at the rest of the odds, I mean, I agree the top 4 is pretty clearly the top 4, and then the 5th one is just a weird one, right? Nobody really knows who the 5th guy is right now. Cade Klubnik is currently the favorite to be the 5th guy at plus 2,000. I personally would not put Cade Klubnik as the 5th guy right now. I would have Shedeur Sanders, and we'll get into our own top 5 in just a second, Dalton. But it's weird that that whole 5th guy conversation is just really interesting. I love hearing, because obviously that's the top 4. I feel like everyone in the nation would agree with that top 4. The 5th one is really interesting to me. So I would have Shedeur Sanders overall. But let's get into our own top 5s real quickly, Dalton. What, for you, gun to your head right now, giving out the Heisman Trophy right now and giving out your top 5 Heisman candidates right now, what would be your top 5?
I think it's so close between the top 2, but I think I lean towards Travis Hunter. Yep. And it's just the absolute dominance on both sides of the ball in the top 10 in receiving grade and coverage grade.
Yep.
4 pass breakups last week against Cincinnati in a big game for Colorado, and over 150 receiving yards. I believe he set a career high in receiving yards. On the same night, he had 4 pass breakups. I mean, I know he missed a game and a half. It was kind of struggling with some injury. He had a shoulder issue, but what Travis Hunter is doing in weeks when he's healthy, playing darn near 130 snaps a week, we've just never seen it before, right? And it makes no sense, honestly. I'm looking at it right now. He's 5th in receiving grade. So you go, he's arguably the best receiver in the country. Whether he were to play it full-time or even when he's not playing it full-time, it's just ridiculous how good he is on offense. And anytime Shedeur wants to just find somebody open and get things done, He can do that, but then he's also 5th in coverage grade and arguably the best corner in the country. So I think if you have a guy who's the best at their position at one spot, you're talking about maybe a guy who gets in Heisman talk, right? When he's the best player arguably in the country at 2 different positions and on 2 different sides of the ball, it's very hard to ignore. I think if Hunter can get through the rest of the way healthy and keep doing what he's doing, I would say he probably wins it, unless we see Jeanty getting to like 3,000 yards or something, right? I would have Jeanty second behind Hunter, having a special season, possibly carrying Boise State to a playoff spot. That might be the X factor for Jeanty as well as Boise getting to the playoff. Third, I would have Cam Ward. I mean, he's just been the heart and soul and leader and everything and leading the Power 5 in so many passing statistics for Miami down there. And he's just changed everything going on. That's, from what's been happening the last really decade at Miami, where they haven't really been relevant in a playoff race in prime time like that. And Cam Ward, multiple big comebacks, getting him through shootouts, high scoring team. Cam Ward's incredible. I think Dylan Gabriel would be 4th. He's having a fantastic season. You came into the year with him as your Heisman pick, and he really hasn't disappointed. A little bit of a slow start for Oregon's offense, but the win over Ohio State was big.
He was magnificent in that game, too.
He was. He was terrific. And even this past week against Illinois, that's a good defense Illinois has, and they just tore him to shreds, right? And, we knew Oregon would be a high-powered offense. And then 5th, honestly, I'm going to go to Colorado again. I would have Shedeur Sanders 5th. Look, Cam Ward's leading the nation in passing grade. Shedeur is tied for 2nd right behind him. And I don't think now, I know Travis Hunter gets a lot of the headlines, but for me, just as maybe a draft prospect and just the way they play the position, I think Shedeur is the best quarterback in the country. I understand putting Ward ahead of him because what he's done for Miami and the numbers, but Shedeur is incredible. I think sometimes it's like, okay, what's the balance of, when you have a great quarterback and a great receiver, all right, it's like, what's the balance of how much is this guy and how much is this guy? I really think it's 50-50. I mean, Shedeur, even when Hunter was out, when you talk about the Kansas State game when Hunter missed a lot of the game, and Shedeur repeatedly got him back into that game. Eventually, they couldn't make the big stop, and he needed maybe one more play to win that game, but then they play the next game mostly without him against Arizona. He's still dominant. Shedeur is a great quarterback, whether Travis Hunter is on the field or not. Obviously, he's better. Anybody's going to be better with Travis Hunter on the field, but Shedeur's having just a spectacular season, and those two guys, obviously, the biggest reasons that Colorado's in contention.
Well, listen, Don, I know the show's better when you and I disagree on things. I actually completely agree with your top 5. I had the same exact order of the top 5 as well. Travis Hunter, number 1, Ashton Jeanty, number 2, Cam Ward, number 3, Dylan Gabriel, number 4, and Shedeur Sanders, number 5. That's my top 5 right there. And I just wanted to get into, for all the same reasons you said, so I'm not going to break it down like you just did there. What I wanted to get into, though, is that this is really down to 2 players, in my opinion, Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty, because the definition of what the Heisman Trophy is supposed to be for is the most outstanding player in college football. And yes, I understand quarterback is the most important position in team sports, right? But you have 2 guys in Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty that are putting up historic level seasons. You mentioned before, Barry Sanders is what we're talking about for Ashton Jeanty right now. And then Travis Hunter, you can't talk about anybody because we've never seen this before. We haven't seen a guy play both ways this much and also be elite both ways this much like Travis Hunter. Like the fact that he has an 85 plus receiving grade and coverage grade while playing full-time at both makes no earthly sense at all. This guy is unbelievable. He's going to have well over 1,000 receiving yards, and he's one of the best corners in the nation as well. He is, in my opinion, the best football player in America. Jeanty is right there with him because those you cannot deny those numbers, and we're talking about historic level stuff. So when you have 2 guys that are putting up history's making stuff at those 2 positions, and you have quarterbacks where there's not a Cam Newton, right? Where there's not a guy who is so clearly like carrying that team. That Auburn team, Cam Newton carried them to the national title. And not like a Joe Burrow either, where Joe Burrow was just smashing every single passing record that we had in the book. You're not having that right now. You're having guys like Cam Ward, who's carrying Miami. Miami's a really talented team, though, but he's a really good quarterback having a really good season. Dylan Gabriel having a really good quarterback, really good season on a great team as well, like Cam Ward. And Shedeur Sanders is having a really good season as well at Colorado, but they're not having the historic stuff, right? And when you're talking about the Heisman Trophy for the most outstanding player, if 2 guys are having historic years, you look at those 2 guys. You don't look at the quarterback. I don't care how badly you want to give it to a quarterback. These are the 2 players that deserve this trophy the most, in my opinion. We'll see how the rest of the year goes, right? Obviously, there's still a long way to go before we ultimately have to decide on who deserves the Heisman Trophy. But as of right now, I think it should be a 2-horse race between Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty. I'm cool if you pick either of them. Gun to my head, I also would go with Travis Hunter right now. But my opinion, I just really get upset when people are like, look at those odds. Dillon Gabriel's tied with Travis Hunter right now. That is not indicative of what has been going on this year, right? If you look at those odds and look at the stats, you would think, oh, Dillon Gabriel is putting up historic numbers too. No, he's not. He's having a really good year, but nothing historic. You're seeing history from Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty. That, to me, is the most determining factor of why I would put those two way above anyone else right now.
Yeah, no, and I think sometimes the odds, we get caught up in what they are right now, but it's actually, they're trying to predict who's going to win it, right? And Gabriel, with a relatively easy schedule, the rest of the way should put up some big numbers, and Travis has some of the...
He can win the Big Ten and go undefeated.
Travis has some of the injury risk, right? Oregon's the number one team in the country. It looks reasonably likely that it could stay that way all the way through, at least till conference title weekend. So, I think you're right, though, and this was the same... I think it's a similar argument, even though it was all quarterbacks to what we had with Jaden Daniels last year, where it was, yes, Michael Penix is winning, and yes, Bo Nix is winning, and those guys have been great. But Jaden Daniels has been the best player in the country, right? When you factor in the rushing and the dual threat and everything, and when you factor in the context of the 3 games they lost, they gave up over 140 points. It wasn't Jaden's fault. Maybe week 1, it was a team effort against Florida State, but that's the one week where he really wasn't spectacular.
But they had the best offense in the country that year.
The best offense in the country. He was the best player in the country. And I'm with you. One of these two guys has been the best football player in the country. It's something to mention for Jeanty. Again, we do this kind of on a weekly basis. 97.3 rushing grade would be a new PFF record. So, I mean, you're talking about two guys setting records, and maybe my favorite stat is your 3 leading rushers in the country right now are Ashton Jeanty, Caleb Johnson from Iowa, and Ashton Jeanty after contact. Yeah. I mean, that's the type of – he's impossible to tackle. He's having a special season. I don't care what school he's at. I mean, I think for me, he's one of the best college backs that I've ever seen. It's just – I think he would do this at just about any school. He's doing it at Boise State. He certainly got plenty of offers in the offseason to go elsewhere, but he's even mentioned he wanted to build something special there, and that's what he's doing. If he gets Boise State to the playoff, I do think that's going to work a lot in his favor.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, listen, he's like 300 yards away from breaking the yards after contact record. He's going to smash that record held by Jonathan Taylor right now. So you and I both agree on that. Dalton, real quick before we go, we have the same top 5. So I want to see if we differ here. Do you have a 6th guy? Like who would be your 6th guy right now if you had to give it out? It's tough. That one is really tough.
That's a harder one because the top 4, I think, you know what? I might throw a fun one at you. Why not Curtis Rourke from Indiana?
Ooh, okay.
And I know he missed last week, but he's got right behind Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, and Jackson Dart is Curtis Rourke sitting here. Actually, Curtis Rourke has the highest passing grade. That's overall grade before that I just mentioned. He has the highest passing grade in the country. I think for what he's done, he's completing 74% of his passes. I think that's a guy who, missed last week. Not sure if he's going to play this week against Michigan State. I haven't seen official word on that yet, but what he's doing over there at Indiana, I mean, the fact that we can even talk about Curtis Rourke in this race and the Indiana Hoosiers in this race. Now I think Cade Klubnik, too, is having a great year. I want to see him do it against some better opponents down the stretch. But, I mean, the Hoosiers, what a big story they are. And Rourke's been right at the center of it for the most part.
I hate that we do it. You literally just took my answer, too. I was good to Curtis Rourke, but I think he's definitely up there.
I think, another one, too, if we're going non-quarterback, just a guy I just mentioned, too. How about Caleb Johnson?
Yeah, he's been
what
great.
A year.
Yeah.
What a year he's having already with, I believe it's over 1,100 rushing
He's
yards.
only 200 behind Ashton Jeanty, which if you're even remotely close to Ashton Jeanty, you're doing a hell of a job.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, you're talking about he's Caleb Johnson, I think it's out of nowhere the year he's having for Iowa, the way he's carried their offense. And 16 rushing touchdowns, only 2 behind Jeanty. Actually, I think he might have a couple receiving touchdowns mixed in there. I know he's got at least one that I believe he had against Washington. But no, I mean, the year Caleb Johnson is having, too, I think needs to get at least some recognition for an Iowa offense that last year, obviously we poked a lot of fun at. But, he's been the center of why they've improved so much on offense, at least, and obviously the quarterback situation stuff. So he's got a receiving touchdown as well. He's only 1 total touchdown behind Jeanty. He's been amazing. I think that's a guy who could get at least a handful of votes down ballot.
Yeah, another guy I just throw in there, and he's got to win out, which I don't think will happen. But Jackson Dart is having a hell of a year as well. But they're not going to win out. Probably they got to play Georgia next week. We'll see what happens, obviously. But he's been having a great year as well. So I want to throw him in the mix as well. That's what we got for our Heisman episode. Again, we have a long way to go before the Heisman Trophy is actually given out. We have to kind of until conference title weekend. After the conference title games, then we'll decide who wins the Heisman Trophy. So still a long, long way to go. And we'll be we'll be breaking down this unreal Heisman race that we have going on the whole rest of the season. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. We're going live on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. to break down all of the biggest results from Week 10, and also probably will affect the Heisman race a lot as well. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our live content and bonus videos like this one.